Hello ladies, gentlemen, and persons in between. My name is Tim Snowborn, and today we're going to talk about the limits of social constructs on this episode of Serious Issues. So for those of you who've never heard of social constructionism, it's basically the idea that we know what we know because everybody knows it. Social constructionism is not an ontological philosophy. It doesn't deal with whether or not things exist. It's an epistemological philosophy. It deals with how we know what we know. Things exist because everybody agrees that they exist. Words mean what they mean because everybody agrees what they mean. For example, this is a cat. We know that this is a cat because everybody agrees that this is a cat. This is a seashell. We know it's a seashell because everybody agrees that it's a seashell. If everyone said that this was a horse, it would be a horse, but we all agree that this is a seashell and a horse is a four-legged animal that runs really fast and lives on a farm or a ranch. Same goes for whether or not things exist. How do we know that Mars exists? Because everybody agrees that Mars exists. I mean, we can see it through a telescope, but we all agree that the thing that we're looking at in the sky is Mars, and we all agree that Mars is far away and has a red rocky terrain, mostly because we all agree to believe the scientists who say these things. Social constructionism is the idea that things mean what they mean or exist or don't because we live in a society that agrees on these things. So it kind of seems like it would go out the window if you were marooned in a desert island. I mean, you would agree that the sand you're standing on is sand and the water you're surrounded by is called the ocean because the society you came from would have taught you that by then. But from then on, as long as you're on the island, you don't have other humans to define new things for you or say that a thing is real or not. Some argue that reality itself is a social construct because we all agree on what is real and what isn't. But if you're on a desert island, there's no one to agree or disagree with you about what's real and what things mean. This is again part of the reason I consider myself an agnostic. We don't all agree what the word God means, and therein lies much of the contention as to whether one exists or not. There was a time when everyone believed in God. But does that mean that God existed then because everyone believed in one? Probably not. In general, social constructionism seems to suggest that a thing exists because everyone says it does, and that a thing does not exist because everyone agrees that it doesn't. Is it possible for something to exist even if everyone agrees that it doesn't? Is it possible for something to not exist even though everyone agrees that it does? Now the question that arose in my mind when I first heard of this philosophy was, where do social constructs end and the natural world begin? Because for me, the concept of social constructs kind of bleeds into an ancient Sanskrit doctrine called Tattvam Asi, which means thou art that. It means everything you think is in here and everything you think is out there are not separate from each other. To put this in Western terms, idealism is the belief that reality is but an extension of our consciousness, and that it doesn't exist outside of our minds, as opposed to realism, which holds that reality is out there independent of our consciousness. Idealism believes that reality is consciousness dependent. Now, if that's what you believe, if you believe that reality is consciousness dependent, it suggests a couple of strange things. For one thing, it suggests that you believe the universe did not exist until consciousness existed to perceive it, which is a strange thing to say. It seems like the planet that we evolved on must have existed before we evolved the consciousness to perceive it. Now you could argue that there were other consciousnesses in the universe before our consciousness evolved, and that the universe existed because of their consciousness, but that's just kicking the can. Then the question becomes, did the universe exist before their consciousness evolved? This could suggest that the consciousness that created and sustains the universe is that of God. Or maybe it just means that reality is not consciousness dependent. It seems like idealism and the Tattvam Asi philosophy kind of necessitate the existence of a god of some sort. Because how else could the universe have existed before any alien or human consciousness existed to perceive it? Another thing that this belief suggests is that if you believe that reality is consciousness dependent, it suggests that you think that if all conscious beings in the universe cease to exist, the universe itself would cease to exist. as opposed to believing that the universe would continue without conscious beings until it evolved new ones. But I digress. The question that I started with was, where do social constructs end and the natural world begins? Because the line is sometimes kind of blurry. Now, obviously, you know that every man-made object is a social construct. This camera is a social construct, my clothes are a social construct, the phone or computer that you're watching this on is a social construct. Money is a social construct. Money only has value because we all agree that it does. Democracy is a social construct. Democracy only exists because the majority of us agree that that's the best way to decide who's in charge. All of these things started as an idea in someone's mind. All of them are a reflection of our values. We decided that cameras should exist, we decided that clothes should exist, we decided that phones and computers should exist. But the thing is, even the natural world, at least to an extent, is a social construct. In that we decide where a lot of trees are planted or removed, we create or destroy waterways, we do landscaping, we mine for minerals, we shape the physical world around us. Climate change and all of its disastrous effects are social constructs, inasmuch as they are a reflection of our values. We as a society decided that fossil fuels were the way to go. We didn't know at the time the damage that they would do to our atmosphere, but once we found out about the damage they do, we decided that that damage was worth it for the energy and profits that they gave us. We endorsed this idea by allowing our governments to perpetuate it. Now our values are changing. Now we've begun to decide that the health of our planet is a greater priority, and we're starting to pressure our governments to reflect that. This too will shape the physical world in the form of solar and wind farms, which are, say it with me now, social constructs, right? Now obviously mountains aren't social constructs. The ocean isn't a social construct, the moon isn't a social construct, the sun isn't a social construct, the stars aren't social constructs. Not in the sense that we believe that our consciousness created and sustains them. But it seems to me that it's sometimes unclear where social constructs end and the natural world begins. So tell me, what do you think? Am I wrong to suggest that everything that is affected by human consciousness is itself a social construct? I mean, you could argue that just because the climate is affected by human consciousness does not mean that it's entirely the result of human consciousness and is therefore a social construct in and of itself. So if you're a realist and you believe that the universe exists apart from our consciousness, hit subscribe. If you're an idealist and you think that reality is consciousness dependent, hit like. If you think the world is mostly social constructs, hit share. Also tell me in the comments section if you are a realist or an idealist. Thank you very much for joining me for this video. Thank you in advance for subscribing, sharing, liking, and commenting. Thank you for any subscriptions, likes, shares, or comments that you have given me in the past. I appreciate your support, and I hope that you'll join me next time for another episode of Serious Issues.